With on TravelDine, we have Gauri Devidayal. I'm sure a lot of you know Gauri. She is the woman behind. I think she has a co-founder, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. But she, along with the co-founder, is the woman behind one of Bombay's finest restaurants, The Table. I mean, I've never tasted food, never had an experience as I've had at Table. And Gauri, that goes to you and your team really. Um, Besides Table, Gauri is also known for a lot of other F&B projects and initiatives that she's involved in. One is the Max Street Bakery, I think, and also there is the Max Street Kitchen. And besides that, she just set up during the pandemic a delivery only format called Iktara. So I'm not going to take too much time. I'm just going to go to Gauri and let her speak. Gauri, before I launch into some of the other questions I have for you today, do give us a bit of a backgrounder on your, on your business, on the kind of F&B, on the restaurants, and what is up and running at this point. I mean, I'm sure the restaurant is not up and running, but give me an overview give our readers an overview of what you do and the restaurants and the F&B businesses you run.
Sure. So, hi, Deepali, and thank you so much for having me on today. Just to give you a little bit of background, so my co-founder is actually my husband, Jay Yousuf, and we founded this company back in 2009 with the idea of opening a restaurant, which we did in 2011, called The Table. It's a globally inspired menu, and it's now with a bit of a blip this year. It's going to be 10 years old in January. About 5 years later, we opened an experimental kitchen space called Magazine Street Kitchen, where we hosted guest chefs from around the world, and it was essentially the reverse of a restaurant in the sense that about 80% of the space was a kitchen and 20% was a dining room. And so it really was a platform for chefs to showcase their talent from all over the world. And we also used to host a lot of cooking workshops, etc. And we simultaneously also launched the bakery that you referred to earlier, called Max Street Bread Company. And initially we were actually supplying, it was a B2B concept. So it was to supply breads around the city to other restaurants and cafes. And we, in 2018, then went on to launch a Southeast Asian restaurant called Miss Tea. That actually we closed towards the end of last year. And in fact, 10 days before the lockdown, reopened it as a Cantonese restaurant called May 13, which unfortunately has had only a few days of being around. And we also, about 2 weeks before lockdown, launched a brand called Iktara, which was an Indian delivery only brand with Chef Amninder Sandhu, who was previously with Arth and the Taj Group of Hotels. So yeah, that's kind of what we've been up to over the last 10 years. But during lockdown, obviously delivery is the only format that's viable at the moment. And that has meant that we've essentially had both our delivery, the Indian delivery brand Iktara. We've had our bakery, continuing to do delivery. That was actually one of the first to resume operations as soon after lockdown started. And we've also resumed deliveries from The Table and Miss Tea. So Miss Tea, while we closed the restaurant down, we kept it going as a delivery brand. So these are the four brands right now doing delivery. But we've also tried to sort of innovate to do other things, other than just the food delivery. So firstly, we've expanded our, area of delivery beyond just Bombay to, in fact, Alibag and Pune as well. And the other thing we did is that, Magazine Street Kitchen, like I mentioned earlier, is for workshops. So we now host a lot of workshops online with chefs from around the world as well as participants from around the world. So it's kind of thrown open some new opportunities for us as well.
Thank you. So that was really interesting. Tell me, what has been the experience with Iktara, given the fact that you started it, right in the bang in the middle of it, everybody was shutting down, and right now deliveries are still a lot better now because the systems are up and running. But you set it up at a time when actually deliveries were difficult to make. So what has the experience been like?
So it's definitely been a very interesting time for the team. We were very excited to launch when we did towards the end of February, and obviously it was a bit of, and we opened with sort of a resounding sort of success, and we were very excited by the response we had. And obviously, then being forced to lockdown was to shut down was a bit of a dampener for the team. But we actually resumed operations on the 1st of April. And what we did, interestingly, that was kind of the sort of peak time that people were very sort of nervous about ordering in, etc. But one of I think the sort of smartest things that we did was that Magazine Street Kitchen, which is the kitchen out of which Iktara operates, like I mentioned, it has a dining room, and we actually converted that into a living space for our team. So we had a very lean team that moved back into Magazine Street, and the idea was that they would stay put there. And so the bakery and Iktara both operate out of there. So we had a very lean team for both operations, staying at Magazine Street Kitchen. And I think that as a sort of starting point gave our customers a lot of sort of reassurance that, we didn't have people moving in and out. And also because, a lot of my team had actually gone back to their hometowns, etc., when we announced that we were closing the restaurant, because we actually closed before lockdown was announced. And so I had a very sort of, small number of people who could actually even come to work, who were available to come to work. And I was going in quite a lot into the kitchen to help out because it was literally all hands on deck. And I think things like this gave people some level of comfort, whether it was to see me or whether it was to, we were very sort of open about what precautions we were taking, etc. And of course, the expected sort of hygiene and sanitary sort of practices that you would expect from, any kitchen facility in terms of, mask, gloves, hand sanitizer, double packaging all our delivery bags so that, the outer layer can be discarded and so it was literally about trying to be practical and understand what customers would be expecting, and I think then subject to meeting those sort of hygiene requirements, the food of course had to be of a certain level and standard, and we had to make sure that we were able to maintain that. Obviously, in the beginning of lockdown, it was definitely a challenge to even source ingredients. Normally, suppliers would supply to you. We were having to go out and buy the ingredients from their locations, etc. So operationally, it was definitely quite sort of challenging. But I think that the fact that we were able to still, with a limited menu, churn out great food every day and take care of those hygiene requirements, it sort of I think the response kind of has grown over the last 5 months, and we're sort of very happy with the feedback that we're getting.
So, this article was actually, thought out of because, we were doing something on this Eat Out initiative that London had. And while everybody started very skeptical about it, but seemingly they have done very well with several million meals sold, people coming out, eating. If you have followed that initiative, what do you make out of it? What do you think really worked for the initiative?
And it was very apparent that the government was they recognized that the industry needed a boost, right? So it's not just about the Eat Out initiative. I think the UK government has been supporting the industry or supporting sort of business in general from the beginning, right? So whether it's in terms of furlough or in this case for the restaurant industry, the Eat Out initiative. I think the first step is that there's a recognition from the government that it needs to support business, right? So I think that, in the case of the restaurant industry, so my understanding of how this worked was that diners were given 50% off their bill, which was subsidized by the government for the restaurant. So it was essentially like a win-win for everyone. I mean, the UK sort of thrives on sort of tourism and people going out and recognizing this, they did what they could to support it. So I mean, I think it's wonderful that this was being made available. And of course it doesn't mean that everyone came running out to eat just because there was a discount being made available, but it's definitely opened up a lot more there as a result, and it's just encouraged people to to get out, obviously keeping in mind again safety measures, but it's trying to boost and encourage morale, and that's what's really needed at the moment, right? So I think that's something that we would look for. Any sort of any industry is going to be looking for that from its government. So I think that it's something that's probably been a bit more amiss over here, but it's wonderful. It's a wonderful example that the UK government is setting.
Fine. So, uh, what are the takeaways from it for the Indian restaurant industry? I mean, do we have any takeaways? I mean, over there, for instance, the government is involved in the initiative. They are the ones who prompted them to come here. I think the government is missing in action in almost every sphere. At least the hotels and restaurants and most of the industries are being told to figure their own way out of this whole thing with very little support. So I don't even know if there's a takeaway there because there was a government involvement there. But having seen that and having seen what is the issue, what are the issues over here? What do you think? What are the learnings from us for us?
I think, like you said, right? I mean, it's not just about an initiative like the Eat Out initiative. It's about, in the first place, the government making a decision to support industry, right? So at the first step, for us, the biggest concern was our employees, right? So being able to, we're looking at now, we've crossed 5 months of them, a lot of them being out of work, and just to keep their sort of kitchen fires burning, honestly, that's the need of the hour. And we have been, I feel, disappointed by the response of the government, because there are measures that they could have taken, to at least take care of those basic needs, let alone, reviving an industry with subsidizing it. So I think that the biggest takeaway that, I would say is that the government has to kind of wake up and step in. And this is not to say, I mean, I understand that firstly, the population that we're looking at in India is, way higher than, is exponentially higher than the UK. But, the point is that there's been very little support and that sort of boost of the morale that's been forthcoming from the government, which is what I think where there's been a shortfall on their part.
There's been a shortfall. But what then, as a restaurateur, do you think the government can do, should do? Because every time you probably turn to them, they say, "Oh, we have so many other issues to deal with," right?
Yeah.
But what is it that you think it can do to support the industry?
I mean, there's various ways of looking at it, right? There's the short term, which is like immediate help that's required, and then there's the medium to the long term, right? So there've been many asks of the government that the industry has been making, which is represented by the NRAI, which is National Restaurant Association of India, and there's sort of requirements that need to be sort of that we're asking. The point is that the ask of the industry from the government is on various levels. There's the immediate sort of requirement, then there's medium to long term as well. And the Restaurant Association, the National Restaurant Association of India, is the one that's sort of the lobbying body, I guess, for that represents restaurants, and has been very actively pursuing the government to implement implement certain changes. But the other complication in which is particular to India is that our industry is governed both at a central as well as a state level, and so every state has its own rules, which make it very complicated to to make sort of sweeping changes on a national level, right? So I think that's one of the biggest concerns. I'll give you a few examples of things. So the the liquor permits for restaurants are managed at a state level, right? So excise manages alcohol, and it's completely different laws in different states. So Delhi is completely different from Maharashtra, and restaurants have, incidentally, restaurant license excise license fees get renewed in March every year for the forthcoming financial year. And so a lot of restaurants had actually paid their license fees upfront for a whole year, which is a large amount for outlay for a restaurant. And there was no question of there being any kind of like a rebate or even a conversation about like this being rolled over to the next year. What's going to happen to that fees. So I think the problem has been both in terms of action but also communication. Like there's been no guidance being given to restaurants about how to manage huge outlays like this, and what's going to happen for the 5 months that we've been closed. There's also been a lot of there are a lot of bodies. So I'm giving an example based on Bombay because that's what I know best. But the BMC, which handles the day-to-day sort of management of the city, and which is in charge under the Disaster Management Act to sort of oversee what's happening during lockdown, versus like an excise or so the thing is that various bodies are involved, and they all need to be sort of talking to each other as well to ensure like a seamless communication going out to the industry. And that has been a miss as well, from what I'm seeing happening in Bombay. And there's various asks. So for example, on the employee front, one of the things that employees are required to contribute to is ESIC, which is the Employee State Insurance Corporation. And it's, as the name suggests, insurance, and it's meant for situations such as this, right, where you're out of employment and you need. So you've been contributing, and this is sort of applicable more to the manager and below level of employees, and they're the ones who are like the worst hit right now, right? So everyone's wondering, like, why are those coffers not being opened up at a point like this, where this is, this is, when would you need this more than, now more than ever? And it's things like that where there's the silence is not something that, not just our industry, but I guess the business community is unable to understand. In another example, the restaurant industry is one of the few industries where you don't get any input credit for GST. And this is a time when this is what I mean by some sort of more long-term provisions where the industry is really sort of lobbying the government to say, like, we've been so badly hit right now, and this is really a time to give some kind of a boost of morale to say that, going forward, this change will be given to this input credit will be given, because that's something that really affects a business like restaurants, which are very capital intense, right? So if you're not getting input credit on all your so the point is that it's about like survival right now, as well as reviving the industry once sort of things start opening up. And I feel like we're not really getting anywhere on either front. So that's essentially what the the challenge that we're facing right now.
So you mentioned about excise duties, etc., or the what you pay for alcohol. One of the things that I was reading about this Eat Out initiative was the fact that alcohol restaurants that sold alcohol did extremely well. Here we have, of course, the Home Ministry saying, okay, restaurants can run at 100% capacity. I think they've also.
So just to clarify, it's not actually restaurants that can run at 100. It's hotels that can.
Okay,
and by
so they have not
definition
yet
of that, No. So, I mean, firstly, the Home Ministry gives a guideline to states, but it's essentially, like I said, that's, a lot of, a lot of it has to be managed at the state level. So, because every state has a different situation
Its
at
own
play here.
situation.
So, at least in the case of Maharashtra, which there are other states where restaurants have been allowed to reopen, but in the case of Maharashtra,
In Maharashtra.
restaurants are still not allowed to open, but hotels are. And by definition, the restaurants within hotels as well
Though I
are
was
allowed to
reading with
open, but only for hotel guests.
hotel
So
guests. I
again,
was just reading that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But tell me, even you're part of NRAI, so you've dealt with restaurateurs across different parts of India. Even where restaurants have been allowed to open, there doesn't seem to be a very clear policy. And I have a feeling, I'm not sure if alcohol is being allowed to serve in the restaurants as of now, which I am not sure what the thinking is behind, because behind that, because if you can go out to eat, you can go out to drink. It's not, I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, what sort of a role does NRAI play? Because obviously a lot of them must be coming to you very befuddled by this आज खुला है कल खुला नहीं है ये alcohol serve कर सकते हैं or you can't serve alcohol. There's a lot of gray areas over there. So how do you deal with those gray areas?
So honestly, I mean, the NRAI is there to support its members and to provide guidance, but it's not a lawmaking body. So at the end of the day, we have to follow the laws of the state, and the NRAI is there to give clarity to its members where it's possible. But like you said, that I think that there's a lot of there's a lack of clarity even at the sort of lawmaking level. So a lot of the officers would be expected to enforce these guidelines, or the notices, or they themselves, there's sometimes confusion at that level as well. So where possible, of course, that's the role of the NRAI to help members sort of navigate the situation where possible, whether it's on legal matters to do with employees, or availing certain of certain laws, or guidance on perhaps how to suggest how to sort of talk to landlords at a time like this. And so I think that's where the NRAs come in. That I mean, honestly, I've never seen the industry rally together the way they have over the last 6 months, and it feels great to have a body like the NRAI to to sort of have like have that camaraderie and that community that you're able to really sort of depend on to help you get through something like this. But so that's where the NRAI comes in. It's to give, and of course there's it's a very powerful association, and therefore is able to lobby both government but also partners to restaurants. So other, like for example, whether it's liquor companies, or so we've had great support from some liquor companies who've actually extended monetary support to like front of house members of restaurants, front of house team members of restaurants. So it's really about like rallying together and like tapping into whatever sort of network and access there is between members in the committee.
So, as you say, it's all about bonding and camaraderie at this point, support each other. So, I think one of the initiatives that NRAI had launched was Rice for Restaurants. What has been the response to it being like? One was, what was the thought behind it? If you can, just give us a little details about Rice for Restaurants, and what has the response been like?
So, Rice for Restaurants was essentially created to give, to again reinforce that idea of community, that it's about diners supporting their restaurants at a time of crisis. So and I think we're all, as restaurateurs, we're eternal optimists, and we do believe that the industry will bounce back at some point. And it was really a matter of saying that, look, support your restaurants really make up the fabric of the city in which you live in. And this is a time in which to, support them, and we will be back. It was essentially about that, and it was a win-win situation for everyone, because we were asking people to buy small value sort of
Coupons,
cash, essentially, which
cash.
could be utilized when the restaurants opened. I think what happened is that, by the time we had our platform up and running, a lot of restaurants, a lot of cities actually opened up the restaurant. Yeah. So in terms of like, save now for later kind of thing was not, it didn't really make sense at that point, because a lot of restaurants had already opened up for business anyway. So, but we had like a lot of restaurants sign up. We had a lot of people buy the sort of the cash. And it's really, we also recognize that everyone's going through a crisis right now. This is not sort of unique to our industry. So yeah, it's something it's there, and it's more relevant, I guess, in cities where restaurants haven't been allowed to reopen still. But no, it was just, again, the point is that the NRAI is trying to do whatever it can within its means to sort of hold up an industry that's really going through an sort of existential crisis right now.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it's an existential crisis. So we can't even figure where we'll go from here, where the restaurant industry will go from here, because everything is so patchy, information, opening. But if you were
It
to
is,
look,
but I do feel like, at the end of the day, people need their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And, also going by sort of what's happening in the delivery space, where people, are. So I think the important thing is diners are supporting the brands they love in some way or the other. So if it's not, in terms of like helping out restaurants which are closed, it could be by ordering in, from if restaurants are doing delivery, etc. And I think that's what it is. That I'll give you a small example. We resumed our Sunday bake sale. So we do a bake sale at the table every Sunday morning, because normally our bakery items were only available for B2B, right? So we used to make it available for consumers. Sunday morning, we used to have families come and, with the little kids come out early morning, buy fresh croissants, etc. And so we've done this for many years. Obviously, that stopped just prior to lockdown. And we resumed that about 3 weeks ago. Um, we actually couldn't possibly have estimated the kind of response we had to people coming, and we literally sold out in 45 minutes for whatever we had. And I think that for me was so reassuring, that people, do want to come back out. They do love the idea of supporting, the restaurants. And I think that as long as you sort of take care of them from your end, in terms of, like I said, the hygiene factors, the safety measures, it's something that is very much, this industry is very much the fabric that makes up a city. And so I think diners do recognize that, and they will be out there to support the industry. And there will be some sort of fallout of this, in terms of some restaurants not being able to sort of come back, but they'll probably come back another time in a different format, maybe. But the industry is definitely here to stay, and we feel, I feel positive about the outcome. And there's a lot of things. It's not just about the relation between diners and restaurateurs. A big part of this is actually hinges on landlords, and that's a really critical factor to this sort of industry being able to revive itself. So there's a lot of balls in the air, and
absolutely, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Because, but people also say, let's look at it from the landlord's point of view also.
Sure.
So there is
No,
a
absolutely.
restaurant point of view, and there's the
It's
landlord point of view, and there is
absolutely, no, absolutely. And there's no denying, that landlords have their own sort of bills to pay, and,
absolutely.
things like that. But I really think that uh, it's a time to kind of work together, which is what I'm seeing even as an industry body, but also with, especially with restaurants which have been there for years, and, you've had a good, it's really together and figure a way out together rather than, so I know this is kind of simplifying it a lot, but I do feel that, so much of the survival of this industry also hinges on that.
So, have the landlords been open to negotiations, to coming on the table, to working out a deal, or the short term for now till
Yeah,
everything
absolutely. Because I think that, I mean, obviously, again, I can speak from my experience, but uh, I think that, by and large, they are. It's a really challenging time for them too. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But I think the point is to figure out a way to, I mean, it doesn't really make sense for them either if restaurants just shut down and, it's not like there's a line of people necessarily, waiting to, queuing up to take over the space. So it's in everyone's interest to kind of figure a way out and, make it work for everybody. It has to work for everybody. It can't be like someone comes out, better and someone comes out worse. So yeah, I mean, and I think in some cases it is. In some cases, maybe it's a better thing for this to be the end of a chapter and start afresh in another way. So yeah.
Great. Just one more question, Gauri. I mean, it's very difficult to look into the future and predict, but if you were to, what would the restaurant look like, say, a year down the line?
So
I mean,
I
do you
actually
believe that situations like leave a crisis like this, a pandemic like this, leaves a long-term effect, because history has shown us that things change, and sometimes things change permanently. So, is there any kind of an idea how we would be, say, a year down the line as far as a restaurant is concerned? If a restaurant like yours is concerned, for instance.
Sure. I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball, but I think what I do take a lot of reassurance from is what's happening around the world. So you look at Europe, you look at even in Asia, Asian countries and things. Life is slowly sort of creeping back to normal, and I think that idea of normal is definitely being reevaluated. But like I said, people will always need breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and uh, and by nature we are social beings, right? Like that is, that's innately what makes us um, you know makes us who we are, and restaurants have a big part to play in that. So I think that there's no denying, there's no point in us being delusional that the next 12 months is going to be a huge challenge, and it's really a matter of surviving and getting through to that point. But I do feel that it will pick up. You may see tighter menus, you may see leaner teams, you may see a sort of a change, a sort of a tweaking of concepts to um, reduce costs. But it's at the end of the day, I think that kind of uh, finessing or getting those efficiencies in is no bad thing. And if you can just somehow get through, the short term, there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gauri. Thank you so much for being there with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Thanks. Bye.